Yo, what is going on, everybody? I am Bert. Today, we're going to be going over the channel's new picture. And what I mean by that is going into 2023, I plan to bring a much more positive image and try to build a positive community around this channel for you guys, okay? I want to build an open, safe environment / community. But with that said, let's get into today's video, which is clinical behavior analysis. Let's give a hand for Aly Rogers for coming on and collaborating with me today and sharing her story. Oh, and just so you know, Aly is a clinical behavior analyst. You're gonna hear more on her story. However, I did want to mention that we discuss a lot of resources and how to get experience in this subspecialty. We talk about her favorite resources, specifically some from the BACB, some from the Behavioral Observations podcast. Dr. Evelyn Gold is mentioned. And realistically, this entire video is going to give you Aly's favorite resources on clinical behavior analysis. My goal for you guys in this video is to make sure that at the end of this video, you guys have a better understanding of subspecialty clinical behavior analysis. Remember though, I am a YouTube Buddy affiliate, and YouTube Buddy is a tool that gives me access to more tools. But seriously, it gave me thumbnail generators, graphic tools, SEO tips, video tag scores, and much more that is vital for YouTube growth. The only reason I'm mentioning this is as an affiliate, I get a code. And that just so code happens to be easily clickable in the comment section below. So all you gotta do is click, and you save. But remember guys, surround yourself with what you love. See, I don't really like that one anymore. It's kind of lame. So, but remember guys, the only thing standing between you and your goal is the BS story you keep telling yourself as to why you can't achieve it. All right, so today we're here with Aly Rogers from Behavior Explained. We're going to be doing clinical behavior analysis. That is our topic today. So first, we're going to start off with Aly introducing herself. And when did you become a BCBA?
Okay, well, I am a clinical behavior analyst that works in Boston. I work privately for myself, and then I also work for a company around here. So I started as a BCBA in 2019, right before the pandemic started. So I had an interesting time kind of actually starting in the field professionally, and transitioning away from being an RBT was definitely interesting with the pandemic starting, but that is when I started.
Okay, and how did you exactly find the field of applied behavior analysis? Like, how did you run into it?
Yeah. So the way that I found my way into the field is kind of interesting. My mom works in special education, and she ended up being an RBT and did these summer programs where obviously I'm home from school during the summer. So she would often just be bringing me into work. And I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the kids that she was working with. I loved the science of it. I loved being able to see them make changes. At the time, she works with littler kids than I do, but being able to see her teach them like their first letters, sounds that they're going to take the rest of their life was just awesome. But I think I also saw a lot of ways that it could improve. And I think that as I was growing up, I don't know if it was because of those experiences, but I just kept finding myself gravitating towards autistic people, I think, too. So many of my friends are autistic at this point, and I think I have ADHD myself, and I think being a neurodivergent behavior analyst, I think neurodivergent people just kind of gravitate towards each other. So I think because of having those close relationships, I also saw a lot of ways that behavior analysis should probably change and could support people better. So
Going right off that.
yeah.
So, what is one thing you specifically like about ABA, and then one thing you do not like about ABA? There's gotta be one and one.
Oh, one and one. Okay, that's tricky. One thing that I love is probably just that it touches everything, that it everything in the world, all of humanity, anything that you want to look at, you can explain and study with behavioral science. We look at animals in lab, and We can look at, environmental science and how to help change that. We can look at what we're going to talk about today with like clinical behavior analysis and more like mental health disorders. You can look at OBM and business. Like you can look at, I don't know, stocks and finance. It's everything, which is the coolest part. I think, especially as I was saying, like being neurodivergent, having ADHD, you kind of always find yourself like striving for a dopamine fix. And you can get kind of bored in your job. So that's what I love about ABA is there's always something different that you could do with it. It's the best.
I'm so glad you said that because I have ADHD too. And it does affect me in weird ways. And that's probably the number one thing is I need some type of fun. If I'm not having fun, I'm like
Yeah.
absolutely not in my mode. Like I'm not locked in. I'm not having fun. I'm not fun to be around.
Yeah.
Um, but I need dopamine. So yeah, that was a perfect way to say it. It's funny. Last question for the introduction. Why did you reach out to me specifically? Why are you here? How did we get to this phone call?
How did we come to be?
Yeah.
I reached out to you because I found your channel and I think that I really appreciate that you are an ABA influencer just flat out because I think that in ABA we really pigeonhole ourselves and we, close people off about topics and about really talking and disseminating the science. And I think we can also really gatekeep it a lot, which makes people, I think, not want to get into ABA influencing. And I think our field as a whole is really behind in that area kind of for that reason. Like if you look at any other field, there's so much content. And not to say that there isn't any ABA content, but I don't think it is the same in comparison. So I definitely appreciate that. And I really like your mentality too, that I think you have a very community over competition kind of mindset. And I think that that is definitely where we should go in general with being people, but also in behavior analysis where think we're not always the kindest to each other.
Right. Very, very true. Awesome. Great introduction. So welcome Aly to this channel. But now we're actually going to get into the real portion of our conversation here, which is what Aly chose, which is clinical behavior analysis. So in our initial discussion about this recording, we briefly went over clinical behavior analysis. So in that discussion, I kind of learned that I have zero clue on what that actually is. So can you please explain what you do?
Sure. I will do my best. So clinical behavior analysis is really using behavioral science, the same things that you're using in, applied behavior analysis, but you're still looking at socially significant behaviors, but usually it's a little bit closer to what you would think of a talk therapist doing, or that's kind of what the job ends up looking like, where people are coming in for problems that are typically geared towards that kind of setting. So they're usually coming in with depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar disorder. So a lot of other disorders that we're not really trained in behavior analysis typically. So they're usually coming in with various different symptoms. And sometimes, there doesn't have to be a diagnosis. It could be somebody coming in saying, at this point in my life, I can't bring myself to go to the store right now. I'm just really having trouble with that, which a lot of people were having, coming out from the pandemic. So kind of working with those people and shaping that behavior back up and kind of looking at the whole environment and coaching them on how they can modify their environment and kind of make behavioral change to then help all of the other processes kind of internally that they're struggling with too, because I think we've kind of learned that you can want to get rid of a feeling that you're having or a thought that you're having, but that just doesn't work, right? Like I can sit here and tell you, don't think about a cat, don't think about a cat, don't think about a cat. When I say it, don't think about it. And the second I say cat, you're going to think about it. That's just the way that the brain works. So the more you try to fight thinking about something, the more you think about it. So really trying to get away from focusing so much on kind of what's going on internally and really helping people figure out what they can change in their environment to make those behavioral changes. Because especially with depression, we know that really the best thing that you can do is behavioral activation, like the act of doing. So the way that you're going to bring yourself out of that depression is getting out of bed. As much as it feels like you absolutely can't, and it can feel like a mountain, maybe you start with just getting out of bed, and that's a win for that day. And then you get out of bed and you're able to take a shower the next day, and that's a win. And that's kind of how we're shaping things. But so my job ends up looking similar, but not similar. So I'm still conducting like a functional behavior assessment and coming up with a behavior plan. But it can often be in like a talk therapy setting. So my office is kind of blurred right now, but there's like chairs, and it's just like a typical kind of therapy office. But sometimes I'll have clients in here, and then other times I'll be in their home, and it really depends on what it works for them, because sometimes it's going to be best for a client to be out of their home where they feel more comfortable kind of delving into topics they might not feel comfortable in their house or around other family members. Or a lot of people just don't, especially teenagers, don't always feel comfortable with you being in their house talking about these really hard topics. So sometimes being in a different space is actually helpful, I think, to provide that separation, because some topics that I have to go into, especially more trauma related, are really heavy. So to go through all of that in your own house and then just kind of be sitting there isn't so great. So this setting can definitely differ up depending on the client, but still always looks pretty similar with functional behavior assessment. I'm asking you, hey, what are your top 3 things that you want to work on? Like, how do you want to change your life? And then going from there.
Okay, this sounds very interesting and very cool. But to know more, how would you even get experience in this subdivision? So how would you even be able to get started going there? And then how would you, or what do you recommend a supervisee do who's motivated maybe for the same route?
Yeah, sure. So I had a very interesting time getting into this field. I kind of fell into it and got really, really lucky. I came out of my graduate program, and the whole time that I was in supervision, my supervisor kept saying to me, you're going to end up in OBM or ACT or something. Like, I don't see you on the path that you're on now, which was just like working in a school that was ABA based. So I got out of graduate school and I interviewed somewhere. I took a job as a BCBA working in autism. And then they got a contract where they said to me, like, I think based on what you're saying, you talk about being interested in treating anxiety, depression, all these different things. We just got a contract where you're going to be coupled with a social worker, and you guys are going to work as a team for all of these kids that kind of keep cycling in and out of hospitalizations or are really having a hard time in therapy. So I jumped on that because I had never heard of a behavior analyst having a role that like was linked to a social worker and that kind of work. So that was really exciting to me, and that's how I started. But I also took a lot of time from taking that job and actually practicing with clients to learn, because there's a huge gap between what my degree was in and my supervision and what I do today. And it wouldn't have been ethical to just jump right in and start treating clients. So I did a lot of training. I think I did both of Stephen Hayes's ACT trainings, like lots of CEUs. I did a lot of Camille Kolu's with Cusp Emergence. She does like trauma-informed behavior analysis. I think that was really important. And I just collaborated so much. All of my first cases, I think if I felt like I was over my head or I didn't have somebody that I could collaborate with regularly, I found someone. Camille was actually helpful on one of my cases, giving a little bit of direction. Another one was Evelyn Gould also helped me on another case, who is very popular in ACT and OCD and anxiety literature. So my recommendation would be don't do it alone. Like, I think in behavior analysis, especially, we kind of aren't so open to collaborating all the time and are really harsh towards other sciences. But there is so much to learn from other sciences. And I think that you're only going to improve as a behavior analyst by taking from other sciences. Like I'm constantly working with social workers, with occupational therapists, and they teach me new things every single day. They give me ideas, even that are behavior analytic based, that I didn't think of. So collaborating with other people by far has been really helpful. And I would say if you want to get into it, find someone in the field that's already working in it and just try to kind of become their mentor. Something like that. And I think that you could also probably reach out to social workers and almost make a really nice collaborative relationship, because at this point, I have pretty good relationships where they're often coming to me too, right? So it's back and forth where they're saying, hey, I have a really tough case. Can you answer this question for me? And I might be doing the same thing about a more mental health related question. So collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. That would be my advice.
A lot of cool things, a lot of positive things I've heard here. So going into my third question for you, let's get real. What are some of the biggest barriers that you come to face in this typical setting? Because we've heard a lot of fun, cool stuff, but let's hear some of the barriers that you might run into.
Sure. I would say the biggest barrier is that this is fairly new to our field. So the research I don't think is where it really should be. So say when I get a referral, and this happens often, say for a teenager that has been diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, which is fairly common for the referrals that I get. And typically somebody that's been diagnosed with that had a pretty challenging childhood. So at the very first stages of life, there were some issues where there was either neglect, abuse, and they really had difficulty with creating good interpersonal relationships. In behavior analysis, historically, we don't even look at RAD. People kind of don't believe it even exists. So me trying to treat somebody with it and find literature that's going to be helpful for treating this diagnosis, quite challenging, which I think that is the case that I ended up reaching out to Camille about, and really having to do a lot of back end work on how do I support this kid, and having to pull from so many different disciplines, because in behavior analysis we don't have the literature, and we don't have enough people that have actually practiced clinically and worked in that kind of setting with those individuals. So I think that is really challenging. And along with that, the gatekeeping that comes with it. I think I've had so many people tell me that I can't treat the disorders that I do, or that I can't do my job, or that it's unethical because I'm not trained. Where at this point, I've been supervised far more by social workers than I ever have a BCBA. So it's always funny for me to hear that when I'm like, honestly, it's like I have an honorary, my supervisor that is a social worker, she's always like, you have an honorary degree in social work at this point. So I don't feel often like I'm out of my league, but I think I get that feedback often from behavior analysts, especially online. I think anybody that kind of finds when I'm working, talking about, they immediately say, you can't do that, without even knowing my education, my background, what my supervision has looked like. So that is definitely the biggest challenge, just kind of the internal battle of figuring out, is what I'm doing unethical, or is it just something that needs to happen to push the field forward? Somebody has to be the first, right? Or the second.
Right, someone does have to be the first. That's
Right.
a perfect way to say that. So going off that though, are there any resources then you would recommend to someone interested in clinical behavior analysis? Like what resources do you need for this?
Yeah, I think so. When I was in graduate school, I don't know what it looks like now, or what other programs look like, but we really didn't touch on clinical behavior analysis at all. I think we went over acceptance and commitment therapy in maybe one or two classes. And I think, I had a verbal behavior class, but it's nothing like what my actual day-to-day job ends up being like. So what I would recommend is the BACB actually put out a really good lecture. I think it was called something like an introduction to clinical behavior analysis, which I think is a really great overview of what it looks like. It starts off with like kind of the history of behavior analysis, and then moving into how clinical behavior analysis started, which is a little bit later. I think the first time anything was published about clinical behavior analysis is like 93. So it's a little bit after, we're starting to really have behavior analytic literature in our own journals and stuff like that. So I would definitely recommend watching that video. It gives you a really good overview and then goes in depth of what it really means to practice as a behavior analyst, and kind of breaking down all of the different tools that we use, like how is shaping used in this kind of setting, how is extinction used, those kind of things. So that would definitely be something that I would recommend. And then I would also recommend, I found it really helpful when I was starting to listen to, not starting, but I guess I felt heard when I listened to, I think, the Behavioral Observations podcast with Evelyn Gould, where she's talking about being an ACT therapist. And I think that her talking about her experience being an ACT therapist, I think is perfect for what it feels like to be a clinical behavior analyst. Because I think it's not me, looking up in a book exactly what to do. It has to be much more flexible and fluid. So I think in it, she kind of talks about like she leaves a session and she doesn't even know what she just did, but it was helpful and it worked. And that is definitely kind of what it ends up feeling like in clinical behavior analysis. Because especially with ACT, I think, you can use like metaphors, meditation, things like that, but it's not going to work great if I'm in a session with a client and I say, oh, let me take out my metaphor book and look for something that's fitting, right? Or I'm just trying to like spew a metaphor at somebody. It's not going to flow. It's going to feel unnatural and not helpful to the person that I'm working with. So I think that podcast is really great for kind of being truthful and honest about what it feels like to be in the chair and to be that person, because it can feel really nerve-wracking at the beginning. Because I think whenever I have practiced an ABA before, it's like, here's the binder, here's the data sheets, like this is exactly what you're doing. And clinical behavior analysis is really way more flexible and fluid than that. So
where do you hope to see the field go in the next 20 years? That's a lot of years, actually, 20 years.
That is a lot of years.
Yeah.
I would hope. So honestly, we've already come in ways farther than I thought we would at this point. So when I graduated, I didn't expect for our field to even be where it is right now. I didn't expect to walk out and then be able to even get a job in this kind of field. And I think that I have been able to watch the field grow I believe I was the first behavior analyst to work for the Department of Mental Health in Massachusetts, which was, as I'm saying, the very start of the pandemic. I think I was literally hired, I think, on March 3rd for my role. So with that, since then, I think the department has realized how helpful behavior analysis is. And has really expanded it. So now almost every program, every contract that we get from the Department of Mental Health has a behavior analyst attached to that program, which was non-existent before. So I think that has been really nice to see. And I hope that continues. I hope that we kind of end up seeing more teams like I'm talking about, where it's a social worker and a BCBA or a licensed mental health counselor, because it can be so helpful to have those two people sitting together. A lot of my job ends up being, an individual having a really hard time with their family members. There might be aggression or pretty serious self-injurious behavior. And it's only happening in the family context. So it's only happening in the home. And for a behavior analyst, the best time for me to really see what's going on is actually going to be in that family therapy session. That's when everything is being brought up. That's going to be the most challenging time for my client. That's when they're going to be having to regulate their own body the most. That's when they're going to be having to communicate with their family members. So the therapist being there and being able to help work on all of the skills that they need and help direct all of the family members while I'm being a behavior analyst, creepy, watching in the back, can be really, really helpful, because after I can come back and say, hey, I think that an hour and a half is way too long. They keep getting dysregulated at like 55 minutes. Let's cut it at an hour. Or, I think this family member really needs to work on more praise. I think that this family member needs to work on whatever. So I think that relationship ends up being so helpful, because on the converse, I don't know how to teach these skills the best way all the time. I would say the social workers by far do. Their interventions around how to help people communicate better in relationships, how to build up self-esteem, like all of these things, they are far better at than I, but the relationship together, I think, works amazing. So I would like to see kind of behavioral science and more of the mental health field get together. And I would also obviously like to see clinical behavior analysis grow. I would love for people to actually know what it is when we're talking about it. I think usually when I talk about being a behavior analyst, people automatically think that I'm the coolest person for being in the BAU and like working for the FBI. And I'm like, no, very different job, very different. But I hope we get to a place where it's kind of like a normalized thing where, you know that you could go to a behavior analyst and work on whatever behavior it is, right? Like the new year is coming up. Let's get to a point where you can walk into a behavior analyst's office and say, hey, I want to work on this for my New Year's resolution, and they help you through the goal. I think that would be awesome. A great place for our field to get to.
Going right off that, I need a good New Year's resolution going into next year. Like I really need to change some things going into next year. But anyways, that's all the questions that we have for today. We just learned a lot from Aly on clinical behavior analysis, but I want to close it up. How was your time here with me today? And is there a specific topic that you would like to see in the future on this channel?
So another subfield of behavior analysis that I'm really interested in, and where I also think our field is super behind, is behavior analysis and data science, or like computer science interacting. So I think that there is so much that our field can learn and improve upon. And there's already some behavior analysts that are data scientists or computer scientists that are working on some really fun, interesting things. But I think that is another topic that I would love to go into.
How was your time with me today? How did you enjoy being on this channel? Is there anything that you would recommend me to make collaborations more inviting for other behavior analysts to maybe want to reach out to me?
I don't think so. I think that you were great with like listing everything out. And I think that honestly, I'm just excited. I think that like before we did this, we had been talking the last time we met about how like there just needs to be more modeling about like what everybody is doing in behavior analysis, because I think not everybody wants to work in autism and you don't have to, but I think people also don't know what that looks like. They don't know how to find jobs. They don't know how to navigate that. And I think, yeah, I'm just excited to see who else kind of gets on your channel and how it develops, because I've already been excited to, see like behavioral shorty, I think was super interesting to like hear about, which is so true. Like as behavior analysts, it's impossible to not bring it into the context of your own life and to start thinking about it in that way. So I'm just really excited to see more podcasts of how people bring behavior analysis into their life in different ways. I think that's going to be really exciting.
Cool. Awesome. Then going off that, so I have collaborations with you. So the clinical behavior analysis will be up this week or next week. And speaking of the behavior shorty, we had Attracting the Love You Deserve. So we have 2 collaborations coming up, everybody.
Oh, fun.
We have Aly and Caroline's coming.
That's why you can catch me next time. Because you got to generalize, maintain, and create a model with long-lasting sustainability and one that's open to change. So at the end of the day, if you want to drive results, and you're looking to get paid, you gotta do what's right to get that bag.
People tell you can be anything you wanna be. Wanna go to outer space, superhero in the streets. Damn, what a lie. What a time to be alive. How will I survive? That's the battlefield. 1974.